Hello and welcome. My cat's here. As usual, maybe she'll lay on my feet because my house is cold. And by cold, I mean South Texas cold, so don't feel too bad for me. But I'm chilly. Anyway, today's video. So I wanted to talk a little bit about rat burnout because I've just been thinking about it a little bit recently. Just as a quick disclaimer, she's rubbing up on the camera. Wow, that was a bad one, Dax. Hey. Come here, silly Billy. Over here. Okay. As a quick disclaimer, no, I am not feeling rat burnout or anything like that, but I have been thinking about it lately because I did lose a lot of rats last year. I mentioned it many times on my channel, but in 2022, I personally got 12 rats that were within 6 months of each other, and Cappy got 3 that were the same age as mine. So last year we just experienced a lot of loss with that group of rats. So there's still 2 left. There's Sunny over there and Fitz in the other cage. So Sunny is 2 years and 8 months old and Fitz is 2.5. So I do still have 2 of my 2022 babies, but they are quite old. But yeah, because I lost so many rats, I was just kind of thinking about it, because one of the questions that people who've had rats for years get quite a lot is, how do you handle the loss? And it's like one of the most complicated questions to ask someone, because there is no good answer. There is no beautiful, magical, universal answer that can help someone else avoid rat burnout. So if you're wondering what rat burnout is basically just when you've had too much loss and you decide that you're going to either be done with rats or take a break from rats. I know a lot of people who have had rats for, almost as long as I have. I've had rats for 15.5 years. And I know a lot of people who've had them the same amount of time or longer, but have taken breaks in between owning their groups of rats. I have consistently had rats this entire time. And there's plenty of other people like me too who have had rats for even longer, 20 plus years, and have just had them that entire time, which is an interesting thought process for me, because it's just like, if you were in the US and you started having rats in the early aughts or the 90s, I know a lot of people who've had rats since the 90s, and how the care has changed, that's interesting to me, having to update your care that frequently, because I've updated my care a ton in just these 15 years. But anywho, I just wanted to talk a little bit about rat burnout and for me, how I haven't taken a break from rats and that kind of thing, because it's interesting to me. Now, I will say this is not a how to avoid it video, because again, it's not a subject that you can really give advice on, because so much of it has to do with grief and personal experience, and has nothing to do with owning rats in general. I will mention a few things that might help, but don't feel obligated to follow my advice, or don't think that my advice will be the cure for you. So I did come close to rat burnout once. It was in 2019. My last rats were getting a little bit older. It had been a while since I had a rat I was really close with. At that time, I had Clover, Caper, and Ruffian. Ruffian passed a little bit young. She got a tumor on her neck, and it was just inoperable. So I really only had Clover and Caper, and I was debating not having rats anymore. But I had bought a Critter Nation for my last 2 rats, and I was just oh, I don't know. And then the reason I was starting to feel is, at that point I had rats for 10 years, and like I said, it had been a while since I had felt really close to any of them. And for most of that 10 years, I'd been getting rats from pet stores. Clover, Caper, and Ruffian were not from pet stores, so from 2009 to 2016 were my pet store rat years. And my experience with pet store rats universally has been, they either die young and unexpectedly, or they sail past 2 with no problems. And it was even with Baker and Barbara that was the case. I got them from a rescue. They were 6 to 8 months old. Barbara died at 1 year and 2 months old, just randomly. He just declined one weekend and I couldn't pull him back and he was gone. And then Baker is approaching 2, never had a problem. Never had a single sniffle, never sneezed, never had any issues whatsoever. And it's just like, that's how it goes with pet store rats. And that can be very exhausting. Clover, Caper, and Ruffian were a lot better because they weren't from a pet store. They were from a breeder. Not a good breeder. I was still learning, but from a breeder. And they did a lot better, but they weren't close with me. They didn't care for me. Caper started to care for me after she had a stroke, because strokes can change their personalities and makes them more affectionate. And that's what happened with Caper. Clover hated my guts. She loved everybody else. She hated my guts. And I do think that's actually really funny, that she would lavish everyone else with attention and try to bite me specifically. I do think that's kind of hilarious. But since my experience for the last few years hadn't been very good, I was starting to feel the beginnings of rat burnout. And the reason I even got more rats was because of Clover. Because Clover was alone after Caper passed away, and she immediately fell into a depression, like a severe depression, that she never actually got out of, even after I got her companions. But I decided that for her sake, I was gonna get at least 2 more rats, and I got Button, Bright, and Pilot. And I don't know, Button, Bright, Pilot, and then I got Rook and Raleigh a few weeks later. Changed everything. They changed everything for me, and I've just been kind of smooth sailing since then. Now, for most people, I think most people don't have very many rats. Like at this point, I've had 63 rats. I've lost 47. And so I've lost more rats than most people will ever own in their entire life. Most people only get like maybe up to 6 rats, and then they're kind of done. And it's because of the loss. And I do find that is what happens. Is like, you don't know how you're going to handle the grief until you lose your first rat. So that's the first like hit basically of rat burnout, is when you lose your first rats. Or the second one is when you lose your first rats and you get more, and you expect those rats to be the same as your past rats, and they aren't, because a lot of people want the same relationship. But rats aren't like dogs. You know, you get a dog, you can kind of assume they're going to love you, and they may not love you in the same way, but they're going to love you. Whereas with rats, you're not necessarily going to get a rat that's equally as affectionate every single time you get rats. Of my 16 rats, I'd say about half of them are extremely affectionate. Of the remaining half, you know, I have a couple that just don't really want anything to do with me, and that's okay. It's like Baker only recently started to like hanging out with me. Fitz isn't very interested in attention. I am the food bringer for him, and that is pretty much all I am. And then Agatha. No interest. But it's fine. I don't mind at all. She is hilarious, so if she wants to go off and be a hyperactive little weirdo and ignore me completely, that's fine, because it's entertaining. And it doesn't bother me, because I can love them just fine even if they don't love me. But for a lot of people, they are looking for a relationship with a rat. They're looking for a bond. And when they don't get that bond, it does speed up the rat burnout. And for me, I always have at least one rat that does like me, at least since Clover and Caper passed away. I've always had one rat that like is really bonded to me. And like the rats that I had when I moved. So I moved to Texas with 17 rats. And I had a very close bond with all of them. For a while I had like 20 rats, and I had like a very close bond with 18 of them or something. So like when you go in to get new rats, just keep in mind they may not be like the same as your rats. And that's not anything that you can help. Now the other big factor is, in my experience, just how you deal with grief. I'm like my dad, I handle it very well, I process it, whereas like my mom and her family don't. And if you don't, you don't. There's not much you can do about that. You can learn techniques to help you get through it, but that's not going to make it easier when one of your rats passes away. And then another factor is your experience with pets. So my family's always had pets. We always had a lot of pets. For most of my life, we had, 2 to 4 dogs, multiple cats, like 3 to 6 cats at a time. The most free range animals we had 4 dogs and 6 cats at one point. I currently have 2 cats and 1 dog, so like not very many free range animals, but we've always had a lot of pets. And when I was younger, they did not typically pass away from old age. So we had my cat Bubba, who died of diabetes that we couldn't get under control. And then we had my cat Jay, who went into renal failure. He was only 2 years old, but we couldn't fix him up. He passed away. We had my dog Casey, who he was missing an eye. A cat had scratched his eye out, and he'd been missing it for most of his life. But when he was a little bit older, the socket became infected, and the infection spread, and he ended up passing away. And then we had my cat Winnie, and Winnie was the only cat we've ever had that was an outdoor cat. She was indoor-outdoor cat, and she drank antifreeze. So basically, a lot of my pet death experience when I was a kid were very sudden, very tragic, and it cut their lives short. None of these animals made it to 10 years old, which is not common for dogs and cats. So like for me, when I got into rats, well, I already knew they were going to only live 2 to 3 years, so that didn't bother me. And I had already had a lot of experience with animals not making it to old age. So like for me, it kind of just seemed normal, I guess, because pets don't always die of old age. Now, for a lot of people, that have rats for like years, what does end up being the ending factor is the age, because rats only live 2 to 3 years, and you have to get 2 to 3 at a time in order to keep, you know, the ages consistent, get a rolling group going, have same age company, that kind of thing. And that can be a lot. Like I said, I got 12 rats that were within 6 months of each other, and they all passed away last year. And that was really hard on me, because those were the ones I had like a really, really close bond with. Like all of them, that whole group, I just was really close with. And the thing with that was, it was also after we had moved, and I did not handle the move very well, so I leaned on the rats a lot just to get through the day. So when they started passing away, I knew it was going to hurt, and it hurt. It hurt so much. But because I had a rolling group, and because I have had rats for so long, I was able to just keep going. But for a lot of people, it's just really hard to not miss them. And it's not that I don't miss them, because I do, but it is also just, it doesn't take away from me my experience of having the rats. It's like, they're gone now, but I still gotta have them. I still gotta had that experience of having their love and being able to love them. So like, while I do miss them, and I wish they could have been with me for longer, I still have like this perfect little time period with those rats where I was happy with them. And that, I think, means a lot to me, because I still have their pictures and their videos. I still have my memories with them, and I still have my love for them even if they aren't there. And that, for me, that helps me with my grief a lot. Now, the other thing that causes rat burnout a lot is the illnesses. They get sick pretty often. And I will say, for me, I've had a lot of rats over a lot of years. I've seen a lot of stuff. I haven't seen everything, but I've seen a lot of stuff. And this may or may not be a comfort to you, but it either wears you down or you just kind of get used to it, because it's like, I see people with their first rats, and their rat gets an URI for the first time and they panic. And for me, it's just like, oh, rat's making noise, gotta get antibiotics. Or a tumor. The first time your rat gets a tumor, it's this really scary thing, and you have to go get him surgery. And for me, it's just like, all right, we'll go lop it off, maybe get you spayed. Because I have females. If you have boys, obviously you don't need to get them spayed. But the scary stuff becomes less scary the more you deal with it. So like for me, the worst one is, so female rats get this thing called pyometra, and it's a uterine infection. And the symptom you will often notice first is bleeding from their vagina. So the thing with that is, more than just pyometra can cause that symptom. UTIs, like a bad UTI, can cause it. And I remember the first time I had a rat with a bad UTI and they were bleeding, absolute panic. I was just like, oh no, she's going to get sicker. I'm going to have to go in for an emergency spay. She may not even make it, because pyometra is just like really bad and really severe. And I was in absolute panic. And then the vet's just like, well, let's try antibiotics, which I hated. I was just like, oh my God, are they going to get my rat killed because they want to try antibiotics? And I gave them 1 dose of antibiotics and the bleeding stopped, because UTIs respond really well to antibiotics typically. And I've had that happen like 3 or 4 times, where they're just bleeding and they get like 1 or 2 doses of antibiotics and it stops. And that really helps you not panic, because you're used to it. It's the same with URIs. The more you deal with something, the more used to it you get. Or alternatively, it wears you down. For me, I got used to it because it's just like, well, animals get sick. I'm used to my animals getting sick. I'm used to my animals needing extra help. So they get sick, you fix them up, and then they're good to go. They keep going. And the other thing is behavioral problems, because rats do have behavioral problems. And I've seen this like really get to people, especially get people who have male rats with aggression, because it is extremely stressful even if you're used to dealing with it, even if you know exactly what to do, because it's just like there's so many steps. It's like, okay, they have aggression. Is it aggression that'll go away, or is it something you have to get them neutered for? If they have to be neutered, you have to separate them until their appointment, and then for up to 6 weeks afterward. Possibly 8 to 12 weeks, because sometimes 6 weeks isn't enough. Okay, well, did that work? If it did, you can put them in with their boy group, your boy group again. But if it didn't, you all of a sudden have to figure out female rats to find with them. Or maybe there's just one rat from your male group that you can put them with. Or maybe, and it just goes on and on and on. It can wear you down. And I will say, the one piece of advice I'll give you on this, if you're starting to experience rat burnout, is you can try different kinds of rats. So, like, if you have female rats and you're sick of dealing with tumors, try male rats or dwarfs. If you have male rats and you're sick of dealing with the aggression issues, try female rats or dwarfs. You can still have these issues with the opposite sex rats, but it is, in general, less common. And for me, the behavioral issues are the worst. That's why I hate intros so much, is because that's when these behavioral issues crop up a lot of the time. Is like, you can have a perfectly sweet, loving rat, you put them in intros, and all of a sudden their personality has a drastic shift and they are a nightmare. And it's stressful and I don't like it. That is definitely for me the worst part, is like you end up with so many groups from these rats with problems, and it can be stressful. So the question is just, is it worth it? For me, it is worth it, because I'm not going to really be saving myself any pain by not having rats. It's just kind of a part of life, is like you experience pain, you get through it, and there's things that make it better. And for me, the rats make it better. Yes, sometimes they cause me pain too, but for me, it's just like I walk in and I see Kelpie's face. Thistle is staring at me right now. She just popped up, and it makes me laugh and it makes me happy. Or like I'll be free roaming the dwarfs, and baby dwarfs are next level insane, because they're not that much worse than female babies, like standard size female babies, but they're faster and they don't look where they're going. And it's so funny. So like, they make me laugh, they make me smile. So for me, the pain of losing them is worth the time I gotta have with them and the love that they gave me. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is, if you are experiencing burnout, that is fine. You can take a break. You can stop owning rats. You are not obligated to keep going, no matter what anyone says. I see a lot of posts and like comments from people trying to like guilt other people into continuing on with rats, even though your emotional well-being is important. It is more important than pets that you don't need. And if they are causing you emotional distress, if they're like making your day-to-day life worse, it is okay to stop owning them once yours are gone. And it is okay to just be done. Don't let anyone guilt you into getting more rescues or anything like that. I see that pretty often of people just like trying to guilt other people, or I don't even know, judge them for not wanting to keep on with rats. And it's like rats are a lot to deal with. So it's fine if you're done. But if you are done, you need to make sure that you take care of your last rats properly, which is making sure they don't end up alone. Now, my best advice for this is, if you end up with a lone rat unexpectedly, try to rehome them as quickly as possible. But if you have time and you are fully aware that you're going to be done owning rats, when you're down to your last 2 rats, I would suggest rehoming them together. And if possible, get a home lined up long before you need it, because it'll just give you peace of mind and that other home will be prepared for them, and it'll just make things a lot easier and smoother. Now, the other option you can do, which it's not for the faint of heart, and most people give up on this pretty quickly and end up with a lone rat anyway, which is you can go and rescue older rats until you eventually have 2 that can go together. Now that as an escape plan is a faulty one, because again, a lot of people give up the second they end up with a lone rat again, they just give up and they just have a lone rat, which isn't good for the rats. But if you feel like you can do that, it is an option. You're not going to get a break from grief in that situation, but that is an option. But it is important to make sure that your final rats have the best life possible, because you want to do right by them on your way out, basically. Right. So, bit of a weird video where I'm just kind of rambling, but I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!